that place that is called the Skull. They crucified Jesus there, and the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. Then Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they cast lots to divide his clothing. And the people stood by, watching. But the leaders scoffed him, saying, "He saved others. Let him save himself, if he is the Messiah of God, his chosen one." The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine, and saying, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was also an inscription over him, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who were hanged there, but kept deriding him and saying, "Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? We indeed have been condemned justly, for we are getting what we deserve for our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." He replied, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
I am one of many people who pay their taxes perhaps differently than people who are normally employed. I don't mean to say I think I am normal working here, but I pay my taxes quarterly, so that in January, April, June, and September, I have to make out a check to the IRS. And I am always very careful that the envelope I use is 2 weeks in advance with a standard return address. I want that to be there, lest the horrible wrath of the IRS say, "You were late, you owe us a penalty." Now, I know this happens because all the time I see on television ads for companies who will help you out of your IRS troubles. And it starts off by saying, "Have you been the recipient of a heart-stopping letter from the IRS?" Heart-stopping. And then it goes on to say, "We can help you." And if you listen to the ad very carefully, it's very interesting because they show a person who's been saved by this company because it has more authority over the IRS than the individual does. And it says, this man said, "I owed $15,000 and I wound up paying only $838 a part." Except in the next part of the ad, it says, "Save up to 40%. Do your math. Do your math. Double talk. But of course, we all know it works because the IRS has the authority to do things. I remember years ago, an actress in Hollywood said, "I am not paying any money toward the military." So somehow she figured out how much her taxes went to the military, and she would deduct that from her taxes. Well, of course, the IRS went in and raided her savings account. She had no idea that they had that type of power. But authority is a big thing in our lives because we all live under it, not just the IRS. As we were talking in the Bible class this Wednesday, when I come here, I go through several traffic lights. And the lights itself define authority. It's red and it says, "Red, you will stop." You may get away with going through it, but someday authority is going to catch up with you. Green, however, is authority that says, "Go ahead, have the road, it's yours." So authority can be a double-edged sword, can't it? Now, what we're going through in the gospel this morning is all about authority, who has it and who doesn't have it. Look at the text very carefully, and what you find is the result of Jesus going to the cross, but it's preceded by an awful lot of authority. Recall in Luke's gospel how Jesus is brought in front of the high priest, who dragged him then in front of Pontius Pilate. And Pontius Pilate is having a tough time. He sends him off to Herod. Herod sends him back and says, "I don't find anything bad with this guy." Pontius Pilate says, "There's no law here that's broken." But of course, the authority of the high priest and some of his minions is there urging him on. Well, we have a law. We have a law. And Pilate simply says, take him away. And he literally gives away all Roman authority at that moment. Interesting how he wants to wield it when it's convenient for himself. But he throws it away at a moment when he could have done something else. So, authority, Pontius Pilate's got it, so does Herod, and they yield to a crowd. And so what happens then, of course, is the authority of the high priest and those who follow him have now become an authority they didn't even know they had. Because let's face it, these are the folks that are playing scratch my back with the Roman authorities. Look, we'll keep quiet, you keep quiet, we'll work together because we don't want any trouble. After all, it's during the high holidays, and we don't want another insurrection that happened like 30 years ago. No, thank you. And so now, they have the ultimate authority. And the scene goes that now they're at the place called the Skull. And look at the type of people who are gathered together. All the people stood by watching. And that group of people is a mixture. It's a mixture of poor. It's a mixture of people who had hoped for Jesus as Messiah. It is a mixture of the disciples who would become the apostles. And they are quiet. And they are quiet because they have absolutely no authority to do anything else. They have been robbed of any authority. But let's go on. Now we have the leaders. They have suddenly been handed all this wonderful authority over them by Pontius Pilate. What do they do with it? He saved others. Let him save himself. He's the Messiah. Sure, come on, let's see. Let's see, Jesus, how much authority you have. Because if you've got it all, you can save yourself. Let's see you do it. Put on a show for us. Others said, well, the soldiers mocked him, saying, coming up with sour wine, which is, of course, all he's worth, according to them, and saying, if you are the king of the Jews, save yourself. If you are, let us offer you a conditional sentence. You said you were. Now I want the proof. And then, the ultimate shaming of Rome. There's an inscription over him saying, this is the king of the Jews. It wasn't enough to shame him by beating him up, by putting a crown of thorns on him and dragging him out in front of Pontius Pilate and says to the people, hey, behold the man. That was supposed to be the ultimate shaming. Take away a person's good name and you have shamed them. It's an extremely important issue in Rome, your good name. But they can't resist. That wasn't enough. Let's abuse and shame him to the ultimate degree and put this across his head. This is the king of the Jews. Now we come to the story of the two people on either side of Jesus. One wants to carry that authority in the same way that everybody else did. The temple people, the soldiers. What does he say? If you are you not the Messiah? Well, come on, save yourself. And oh, by the way, save us too while you're at it. I want the authority on my side, and I want what I want. I don't want you to just save yourself. I want you to save us too. I want to be a little bit greedy about this. But on the other side, is this other man who says, we're here because according to Roman law, we belong here on a cross. And somehow he kind of sees through what nobody else seems to see. Because when he turns to Jesus, he says, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And when Jesus replied, truly I tell you today, you will be with me in paradise. Now this whole issue of authority is an interesting one as Christianity develops. Because the shape of the church comes in, and there are the people who come together, but in order to make that cohesive, we need various leaders to do things. Stephen is the first martyr of the church, but he organizes food, makes sure everybody is fed. Certainly Peter is kind of the leader of the group speaking for the resurrected Jesus. And authority begins to develop, and it develops throughout the next 2 millennia. Now, to be sure, authority is a tricky thing because it is a two-edged sword. And we see all kinds of abuse through those millennium of what was supposed to be an authority to do which is good, to an authority which is greedy. And if anything is to be said about what we as individuals are called and what the church is called to, nevertheless, we are still embedded in that kind of authority. I thought about that when I was looking at this text, and I went back and looked at my ordination vows, and that word of authority was in there. I had forgotten it was there. You, Fred, now have the authority to do the following things. To preach the gospel, to teach, to do the sacraments, to proclaim forgiveness. And it is a very mysterious authority to me because even when it was given to me, nothing internally happened to me. Like, ooh, wow, this feels good. I like this authority. On the contrary, it's a scary authority. But even in my authority to do that, why is it being done? Because I'm supposed to give you the authority to do things maybe you might not think of doing or that goes beyond your comfort level. And so, you see, authority is not just something that is wielded, it is gifted. It's gifted, it's given away. And sometimes when I think of what churches are called to do, or individuals, we are called for, let's just say, we're called to feed the poor, all right? That can be a big law over your head that says, do it or else. But when Luther came along, he said, try this instead. Instead of do it or else, say, the risen Christ has given you the authority to feed the poor. You have the freedom to do that now. You don't have to think about whether this is the right thing to do or when we should do it or how we should do it. It simply says, I give you permission to be what we celebrate, in August, September, God's work, our hands. That is the authority of God saying, go ahead, go ahead. And that type of authority creates. It creates full stomachs. It possibly creates justice to be done. It creates all kinds of things that the world needs so very desperately. I'm looking like all of you are right now at the whole political mess in Washington. And I get very discouraged when I hear all of this stuff because there's so much data going out there. There's so many people talking at one time. And there's so much to sift through and put it all together. But the one thing I do know is it is a test of authority. And how that authority works is very important because when I mail off my quarterly taxes, I'm paying these people to do authority. And so are you. And it's a tricky thing to get all through all of this. And I don't know how it's going to turn out. But what I'm hoping for, and by God what I am praying for, is when the whole thing is figured out, and some type of sense is made out of it, that someone will say, now we have the authority to do what we are called to do. And let's get on with the business of what we are called to do. It's complex. It's sometimes difficult. It sometimes drains creativity. Nevertheless, this Jesus hanging on the cross, and this man on the right side of him, who looks at Jesus and says in his mind, I know that despite what I'm seeing, this man hanging there, he has authority to do something, even at his weakest moment. And in that weakest moment, I will turn to him and say, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And he turns to this man and says, truly I tell you, you will be with me in paradise. Now, I'm not about to want to be hurried into paradise, and I'm sure you're not either. So what does it say while we live and breathe and sit here? You have authority to speak and to do those things that treats people we don't even know as if they were truly our brother and sister. It's not just something that says, you got to do this. It's simply God speaking through all of us and to each other. We have the authority when we see God's work to become his hands. And when we do that, everything God would have wished for the world becomes true at that moment. And the resurrected Jesus becomes alive in this world once again, person by person, church by church, until it comes to its triumphant day, when Jesus will make all things one in one. Gather us together, where all tears will be wiped away, and where authority of God looks upon us, not as something hoarded over us, but freely given, for in the kingdom of God, we're going to love each other. So we might as well get on to the business of getting it done.